Well, hi, and welcome to another episode of Getting Started in Commercial Real Estate. My name is Jason Luckhart, and I'm the National Manager for NAI Harcourts. In this presentation, we're going to address sales pitch proposals. So hopefully, even though it's getting started in commercial real estate, there's a few little tricks here that even the most seasoned practitioner can find and take advantage of. Just add that little extra to your next presentation, because we've got to think about the fact that it's a sales pitch proposal. We're a sales professional, and it's hard to believe that we're the only person that's being called in terms of these to present to a client. Client's going to look for someone that wows them. We don't just want to go through the motions. So in terms of a sales pitch proposal, I've broken this presentation down into two parts. Initially, I'm just going to take you through what I regard as the core elements. They're those things that it's the usual stuff that you will find in a normal presentation. And then I'm going to have a deeper dive into some of the other elements that hopefully will take your presentation to the next level. So we're going to assume that you have a fundamental understanding of what goes into a normal sales pitch. You know, you're sales professionals, you've been doing this for a while. And all the notes for this, now you can either email me, jason.luckhart, LUCKHARDT, at naiharcourts.net, or if you are part of our group, go straight to our H1 library and you'll find all of this right there under the commercial section in the H1 library. But let's get started, and I'll take you through the usual elements that you would expect to have in a sales pitch. So first of all, obviously an identification of the property, an executive summary attached there too, and an introduction, basically highlighting what is the purpose of this document. Why are we here today? What are we looking to cover off on? Then, time to put a little bit of sales spin in terms of yourself and the broader team that you might be working with. You know, who are you? What do you bring to the table in that regard? And more importantly, the broader team as well. You know, what does the brand, the office, all the other personnel, the reach that you've all got, sell yourselves there in terms of why they would be choosing you over someone else in the marketplace. Underpinning all of that, of course, could be something such as, you know, your track record and your capability statement in regards to, you know, what you've actually achieved in that local marketplace. And don't just stop there. Also show them your ability to research and understand the market more broadly. Any other market analysis, just because someone else has performed a sale doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't be sharing that information with the client. It shows that you have a broad understanding of all the factors at play. Now, to sales pitch proposal. So next, we're going to move on and we're going to discuss the actual sales strategy itself more broadly. And I break that down into a few key categories under the sales strategy. First of all, obviously, method. Now, I'm not going to debate method here at this point in time. You know, you might be in an auction-oriented marketplace. It might simply be that it's you know, an informal structure of some sort, an informal tender or expressions of interest, offers to purchase, something along those lines. You're the local professional. You choose based on what you know to be working in your local marketplace. I'm not going to look at pricing as something that, that you're a valuer. It shouldn't be something that is a singular figure. You will need to justify the kind of range that you believe the property be in and have some methodology underpinning all that. That will actually show your market knowledge, but don't actually look to give singular figures unless you're suitably qualified as a valuer. But as a sales pitch proposal, I find that highly unlikely. And then the timing. Timing on a couple of different levels. First of all, the actual campaign itself, what that should look like, when it starts, what the lead up looks like, you know, walk them through that. And also on a more broad scale, what time of year? Is it coming up towards Christmas? Are we going into a shutdown? Are there school holidays? Do these influence the local marketplace? Address all these issues in the timing part of your proposal. Now, sales pitch proposal, obviously there's a proposal part in that incorporates some cost. What's the budget? What kind of marketing? Break that down into a detailed expenditure, justifying the different areas of that. And while we're on the topic of cost, obviously, what are you going to cost? what sort of fee structure are you looking to charge? And in terms of that, it might be something where you actually build in some success fees. Be prepared to justify why you're charging that fee, or at what point you believe there should be maybe a success fee or a bonus structure if you achieve over a certain level. And the fees can also be extended further into some discussions around other things, such as you know, the joint agency side of things. You know, if you're going to bring in a co-agent, or if you're looking to conjunct through the course of it, so you can cover off on that element as well. You should be discussing any other conflicts, so any other appointments that you currently hold, whether or not they represent an impediment, and be able to justify why they don't, if you are holding competitive stock at the present moment in time. And any other, key annexures, anything specific about you, your agency, what you're doing presently, even other services that you might be recommending as part of the overall sales pitch process. So that's the usual stuff. Nothing probably too surprising to many of you there. And what I'm now going to address are some of the bigger and punchier items that you might want to address, and break it down even further. Some of these will actually sit within inside these headings that we've just covered off on, but I'm looking to provide you a more detailed framework to move towards. So I'm going to discuss and break down in coming slides detailed benchmarking, the elements that you need to consider in terms of doing that, key market insights, and also the sales management process in more detail. So let's start with a discussion around detailed benchmarking. Now, the more sophisticated the asset that you're dealing with, the more relevant this type of research becomes. If it's just a one-off strata title and you're doing a proposal, clearly we're not going to go into this kind of depth. But if it is something that is a large-scale proposal, a big asset that we're looking to take out, there's quite a number of considerations that we need to address. So build yourself a checklist. That's what I would suggest. And I'm going to present you with one here. And these are the sorts of things that you might consider in terms of building a detailed benchmarking that you're going to sit and work through with the client. So first of all, a whale. This might be a term you're familiar with, or it might not be, depending on where you are. Sometimes often referred to as a WALT as well, weighted average lease term. And this basically has a risk analysis up against the financials over time as to basically how the asset is going to perform, where its weak points might be. And it's regarded by many investors as a great way to benchmark the value of the property in terms of it against another similar property that might have a lesser term. You can also look at locality benchmarking. There's obviously some geographic areas that are going to look more secure. Primary CBD, usually regarded amongst the most blue chip of assets. Interesting period in our history at the moment, of course, of many CBDs less operational than they've been, and so therefore, regional have tightened considerably in recent times. So this would be something you'd be looking to benchmark and demonstrate why you're actually taking that asset to market at this point in time, because retailers seem to be quite resilient, less affected, and as such, the yields have changed remarkably in some regional sectors. But while we're talking about sectors, we can also consider market sectors. So, whether it be retail, office, whether it be a specialist sector, there'll be benchmarking that you'll need to provide a client with to show them that you understand how that asset is actually positioned in the current marketplace. This can also be achieved through good relationships with local valuers, and actually ask them if they've got anecdotal evidence that they can also provide you with. There's also going to be a need to benchmark against what competition exists here and now, what is actually on the market that's comparable, maybe what's been recently on the market, and what sort of sales have been achieved in that regard. And then while we're benchmarking the asset itself, we might want to look at the CapEx requirements, what sort of money needs to be spent moving forward on the asset. And then the leases themselves, what underlying incentives sit there, and what what's left as residual in terms of any abatements, and we'll need to look at the financial impact modelling of whether or not it necessarily gets paid out now by the current owner, whether or not it gets left in the asset, and what that does in terms of yield impacts. In terms of determining some of these, can I suggest that you consider also the use of professional services? So in terms of looking at things like the CapEx requirements, you might actually want to have a look at usable lifespan in terms of some of the mechanicals in a shopping centre, for example, whether or not there's replacement or usable life, what sort of depreciation sits around that from an allowance point of view versus what needs to be actually upgraded right here and now. So for that, you might look to use the services of a quantity surveyor. We could also talk about valuers and property economics analysts when we start to talk about some of those other areas like the underlying incentives and financial impact modelling. Obviously, valuers are a fee-for-service type arrangement in a lot of cases, but sometimes it can be relationship driven by you as an agent. Property economics analysts, you can actually find them sometimes with inside valuation firms, or many agencies these days even consider taking on recent property graduates and actually using them to perform the role of analyst and doing some of this financial impact modelling. So there's a couple of suggestions as to how you might structure your agency depending on size and resources that are available moving forward. Next, I want to take you on to key market insights and how you might apply your key market insights. At the end of the day, what you're looking to achieve here is convince your client of your worth. As I said at the start, you're a sales professional, and it's hard to believe that you're the only person that's going to pitch on a good asset. So you need to provide your client with a belief that you're going to be able to get them the absolute best outcome because of the nature of your service. Okay. Again, I would suggest that we do this by working on building ourselves a checklist of the things that we might to look at analysing in a local marketplace. Okay, I'll give you an example: capital availability. Who is actually out there buying in this marketplace? If it's a marketplace that's particularly dominated by a couple of key players, you might like to profile those buyers, and it depends on how strong your control in that local marketplace, whether or not you actually highlight them by name or just simply by nature. But certainly with large capital transactions, often the buyers are named, profiled. There's an understanding of what their sort of buying requirements are like, and the reason for engaging you as the agent is that you are a specialist negotiator that can actually pit a couple of these buyers against each other, and you're demonstrating your knowledge, your in-depth knowledge, particularly in terms of what their buying profile might look like. What are the debt market conditions? At the end of the day, the access to capital is going to be a very important factor in terms of a buyer proceeding with the acquisition of an asset. So having an understanding of what the lending requirements look like at the moment, what are the LVRs in regards to a particular asset class or a particular region? Have lending guidelines changed? Is it just simply an asset class related issue, or is it a geographic type issue? Is it even just bank exposure to a particular segment of the marketplace? Understand these and obviously guide your client appropriately. Key investment expectations. What sort of yields are expected in the marketplace, for example? Or it could be in the case of, say, potentially a development site. What sort of rate per square metre do we normally estimate the range to be in terms of the land content? It might also be understanding what building materials are doing and costing in terms of bringing a particular asset to market. CAM planning knowledge, it's another key area that you bring to the table. Talk to the client about what sort of potential there might be. Are there any limiting factors in regards to the asset? Are there any unique approvals that are attached to the asset? Due diligence considerations. What things usually come up? You're a active practitioner within the marketplace. You've seen these transactions go through before. Where are the pitfalls? What are the things that we need to have ready for potential purchases? Guide your client. You're the market professional, so bring that skill to the table. Similarly, you've seen them before, the contracts. You know what sort of expectations. Let's deal with any conditions that we think might need to either be added or dealt with prior to exchange of the asset. Are there warranties that need to be given, transferred? Are there potentially structure issues? Is there any terms that might be offered by your client? Are there other things in terms of investment vehicles that need to be considered in terms of how the asset might be acquired? Just remember, at the end of the day, this is all about you demonstrating your expertise in the marketplace to demonstrate how you're going to give them that competitive edge, get them the best possible price in the marketplace. Now let's look at the sales management process itself. We've all seen these calendars that we give clients, particularly in the resi market. Here's the date that the advertising starts. Here's the date that we're going to do our open homes. Here's the date that we're going to have an auction, and that's what the timeline looks like. Now that's wonderful, but at the end of the day, as I said, it's a competitive marketplace. You're looking to wow your client. Imagine if you took them through a much more detailed step-by-step procedure. Isn't that going to give them a lot more confidence that you know what you're doing and that they're involved, you're bringing them on the journey? So I'm looking to have a more granular breakdown of the sort of services that you provide. This is just my version of one. I would suggest that you work through the sheet that that you download with this and add or subtract where appropriate to your particular marketplace. But in the first instance, let's look at the pre-campaign. We're going to execute agency agreements with the client. We're going to sit with them, brief them in detail in regards to what we require. We're going to agree on things like the marketing strategy and the budget. Okay. Also consider who might be the initial target buyers. Are there any ideas that they as the client have about who they think might buy it? Do they want you to directly approach any of those? Also, they'll be the ones that you've detailed in your proposal. How are we going to handle that initial target group? We'll also look at how we're going to prepare the data and have it available for viewing. Commonly in the modern age, where we've got lots of documents, a hosted data vault is a great method. That can also contain things such as a non-disclosure agreement, a confidentiality agreement that can get signed off on by clients electronically. It'll also give you great insight as to how many times they're actually accessing the data. That's a great demonstration of how interested they are a lot of the time, and you'll get those reports behind the scenes and get an idea of who's the most interested. Little items like preparing the financials, preparing an e-flyer, and the information memorandum itself. But if we put these all down as steps and walk the client through, it's this engagement piece that we're looking to establish here. We'll also take them on the preparation of the advertising design and layout. And it's the modern age. Marketing videos are key in so many campaigns these days. So let's pop that down on the pre-campaign as well. So we next step up to pre-launch, and this is just this kind of work through that final checklist before we actually release it to the marketplace. But let's complete, summarize, sign off on all those marketing materials that we took them through in the pre-campaign, review all the documentation that's attached to it, make sure that it's free of errors and that it's complete, that we've got all the things that we said we were going to collate. We're going to book the advertising. And those target buyers that we identify, let's get them the information memorandum. Let's make them feel a little bit special as well, bring them on the journey and let the client know that this is all part of the strategy, that those targeted buyers, they're giving that little bit of extra time because we really think that they're potentially strong candidates for the acquisition. If it's a asset that needs to be marketed overseas, obviously book any offshore press advertising. And let's just review how all that material is presented to the buyers. Are there any other bits and pieces that we need? Then let's sit down with our calendar and the client and set up those weekly meetings that are going to be so important, whether they're face-to-face, whether it's a booked-in phone call, or in the modern age, maybe a Zoom call. We're now ready to take it to the market. It's the campaign launch. Let's get that e-flyer out there in the marketplace. We're going to upload the listing to all the relevant websites that we identified. We're going to roll out the advertising, whether it be national, state, local, it's up to you and your marketplace. Direct presentations with those target buyers. Let's make the time, let's go see those guys before we get deep into the actual campaign itself, where we've got some new faces appearing, those that we already identified. Let's see if we can book in stuff nice and early with them. Any of the qualified buyers that come as a result of any of this pre-campaign activity, let's give them access to that data room and let's get them in there and started on the information. And let's coordinate where appropriate any inspections. Let's follow through on those weekly marketing updates and make sure that we have the buyer follow-up as a schedule item inside our sales management process, and inform your client that this is what you're intending to do. Then campaign draws to a close. We take them through a review period. So explain to the client that what we're going to do is we're going to review those offers. We're going to shortlist them. And as a result of that shortlist, we'll actually work out whether or not there's potential for further round bids. Do we need to satisfy some conditions? How do we tighten up the conditions of that contract? And if that's the case, negotiate towards the final terms with whoever the preferred purchaser might be. Optional step that could occur at this point in time might be the due diligence, any review of contracts as they come through, whether or not we need to coordinate particular consultants on behalf of a potential acquirer. They might need to inspect the property, carry out building inspections, might need to do some valuation work, things of that sort of nature. And also important to consider things like the control of any public relations associated with an asset, particularly if it's a key market asset and it's got something that's going to generate intense local interest. That can happen even in regional towns. I recently saw a sale at a Queensland regional town of a heritage listed asset, and incredible amount of conjecture around whether or not there was going to be a review, for example, of whether or not it might actually be demolished or relocated, and just needed to control the PR around that. Finally, most important part, this is where we look to get paid, but working towards the exchange and settlement, assuring the client that we're there to arrange any pre-settlement action items, follow through on those things that might have been highlighted through the contract piece, and particularly liaise with any outstanding consultants or handover items that are required, taking it right the way through to the point where it actually settles and new ownership. So, as I said, these are more granular elements, but just think about how much more you can engage with your client by taking them through this sort of procedure, as opposed to just dumping a calendar in front of them and saying, here you go, this is what we're going to do here and where. So in summary, guys, what I'm saying here is let's focus on putting together the best sales pitch proposals we can by looking at some of the value adds that should be in these. I mean, it's a sales-based environment. You've got to put that extra effort in. It's always surprising how salespeople think you can produce the same old thing, just pop it in front of a client, and that it's a lay-down misere. At the end of the day, putting things like this benchmarking, these key market insights, demonstrating your market knowledge, and then engaging the client, taking them on the journey with you through this sales management process. This is the sort of stuff that they're expecting from you. It's a fee-for-service industry. We've got to provide the service. Look, as always, I'm happy to hear any other content recommendations. If you are doing something in your sales pitch proposals that you think is absolutely fantastic, I would love to hear from you, love to share. If you want to collaborate with me on one of these as well, always welcome. But in the meantime, happy selling. Thank you very much for tuning in, and talk to you next time.